Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the greatest show on earth. Today we have none other than Charles Carillo. Welcome to the show, Charles.
Thank you so much for having me on, Trevor. It's great to be here.
Charles is one of the most amazing entrepreneurs I've met and long-term entrepreneurs. We were just talking a little bit before the show, and I'll let him tell you once I read his bio here, but he's been entrepreneuring since graduation of college. Like, he never knew corporate America. He didn't have to suffer those 9, 10 years or 9, 10 months that some of us had before we realized I should start my own company. He is the original and continues to be entrepreneur. So happy to have you on my show, and very honored, sir.
Thank you so much.
So Charles Carillo, founder and managing partner of Harborside Partners. Charles has been involved in over 200 million in real estate transactions, focusing on renovating and repositioning multifamily and commercial properties. He's also a passive investor across different asset classes, including, listen to this, commercial real estate, early stage tech, and, new one for me, ag tech startups. As the host of Global Investors Podcast, Charles shares his experience with us, with other real estate professionals, offering valuable insights into building wealth through real estate. Welcome again, my friend Charles.
Thank you.
Do tell the audience what ag tech is. I mean, I know it's agricultural tech, but what does that look like? Just a little bit before we start here. Like, what is
Yeah,
that?
I've been asked this before. So it's where it's coming off the whole thought process that agriculture is not as efficient as it should be, and by usually like soil and stuff like this. So it brings in a lot of testing, a lot of utilization of technology to test soil and to make them more efficient, more effective, grow some more plants. It's a way of doing it without, actually like in many parts of the world. And like, so it's one of the companies that I'm involved with is they're really based in like Brazil. That's mainly where like they're doing a lot of it, a lot of their work. So they can go through, they can take soil samples, they figure out exactly what the nutrients are missing for doing this or doing that or growing whatever plant it is, and it's quite fascinating. And as we're seeing farmland like diminish throughout the world, it's something that it's going to be. I understand. I believe. I mean, this is a this is early stage tech startup, so this is not.
What makes it super interesting?
Yeah, so put a very small amount of your net worth into anything like this, less than 1%. And it is, as my thinking goes through like 10, 15 years of how it is as, farmland starts disappearing more, and, the farmland we have, the soils that we have, everything like that, it's going to have to become a lot more efficient. It's going to have to become higher grossing. And instead of just like throwing seeds in, or you know what I mean, doing it, it's now we're testing. They tested with technology, they formulated technology, and now some of the large investors we have are all based in like Brazil, that are in one of these companies, and even like the country of Brazil. You know what I mean? So
Really?
it's if that's good or bad, I don't know, but all I do know is that it is true. I mean, with as the world grows, that land little by little, especially the land that we're going to be using that's actually farmable, is it diminishes little by little. And so I
Right.
think that making it more efficient, and this can be used for everything. It's not just for large growth crops. It could be something that could be pushed down as far as, technology that they're already utilizing in very expensive farmland, like wine and stuff like this.
Grapes, right?
That's something that they've been utilizing for a while, and they know exactly how that works because the money's there to do it. It's much different if we're growing like, wheat or something like this. But important stuff,
I
I think.
see.
But it's interesting.
That is
It's
interesting.
it's very it's riskier, but it's interesting. I just like to see the problem with being an entrepreneur and then also investing in startups. You're like, yeah, that's a really good idea, and you're like, okay, I gotta start. I've been really lucky a lot. Like I've never had I have a really good ratio with startups and investing into them, and they're very rocky. It's not. I thought syndications were rocky for real estate. No, this is nothing. It's
No?
just like we're ready to go bankrupt. No, we put like two more people on. We got like another $100,000. We got like four new clients. We're like, you know what I mean? All this kind of stuff. And you're like, oh my God, this is like a turnaround in like 1 month of like 180 degrees.
Wow.
But it's exciting. It's exciting that you have a little bit of your money in there. You know what I mean? But it's also when you see some of the ideas, I've done more fund investing lately in where you're investing in a fund, and then at that point what you can do is they will, over like a 3-year period, put it into maybe 20 different companies. And it's much different than real estate investing, and we'll get back to real estate in 1 second. But the whole thing is that what I realize is that if you have $10 million, so if they raise a fund for $10 million and they're putting it into different startups, you're only really putting out like $3 to $5 million, and then you're seeing where the winners are, or where the ones that are like making progress, and that's the ones you're doubling, tripling down. You know what I mean? So it's
That's
not
the one that
just
gets like
like,
the next round of funding, right?
yeah,
That kind of
which is
series.
yeah, which is different, right? Correct. Which is different from real estate, where they're like, oh, we raised $10 million. We're going to get this like put out, or like whatever it is, as soon as possible into different real estate projects for this year, because we want to close it by the end of the year. But it's different there. They're like, all right, we do like a little bit, then we'll do a little bit,
Hmm.
and then we'll see the winners. So you have like some that like never hear back. So it's pretty interesting because they have like a Google sheet you check on, and you're like, you see some of the websites, and you're like, tell my wife, I'm like, damn, that's a really good idea. Like, you know what I mean? Why did I never think of this? Like, such a smart idea of stuff you're doing. And you're like, and then you see some, you're like, and then you see other ones, and you're like, yeah. But when you see ones that are really good, you're like, wow, that's awesome. Like, it's great that they search this out and we're able to find it, because most people, active people that aren't in the startup community, would have no access to it, like myself. So,
What keep you with the start, because this show is entrepreneurial in and of itself, because syndicators are the definition of entrepreneurs. So we're not off base here at all. What Curious to know, what was the most interesting or most innovative startup that you have either came across that was successful, or invested in that was successful, or maybe was interested
um,
in died anyway, maybe.
I found one that was, okay, so I invested in that one of the ag techs that was like, that's really based down in Brazil. That was very interesting technology that, I found that very interesting, and it was, that was a very, the technology that they had there I had never seen anywhere else. I invested into another company that's doing really well, that they have like taken search, like, where you put something in, you're searching something through Google, and they've changed around the search. And what it is it's a they reformulate it so it's like it's not as clunky with all the affiliate and things like this. So if you put in there, start with like furniture, and now it's into all these different industries, you can put something in and it gives you honest reviews. It tells you exactly like, there's no like
Interesting.
fluff like you have going in Google. So like for people that actually want to buy, and you're getting honest reviews, there is ability of you're getting like an affiliate commission for the company through it, like, whatever it might be. But you look through it and it's like very simple returns. Not like, you put something into Google and you're like, oh my, holy my, you know what I mean? You're like, this is just, I got all half the page or half the thing is just
Right.
sponsored ads. Then there's like
Mm-hmm.
shopping for this, especially if you put something in that you're shopping for. Then it gives you
Oh,
like
God forbid.
40 pictures of like stuff I want to buy, like I'm supposed to be buying. And then it's just like a whole mess. You know what I mean? So it's like, for doing it, I found that very interesting. Yeah, I mean, like all different types of stuff. There's one that was like, it was very interesting. It was like, it happened to be, I invested before COVID, and it really took off during COVID. And it was like Bluetooth,
Really?
like locker systems with your phone. And they
Like for
then
gyms?
like anything. So it could be like if you're picking up your food, and you
Hmm.
just take your phone, and I could go up to it, and it would unlock where my takeout food was.
Oh,
If you're
really?
like in a town and you had just there's basketball courts, right? And they put two basketballs, and they put them inside these things so residents can use the basketballs. You can just,
Like
if you're a resident,
dispensers?
right,
Yeah.
you can just get the ball out of it and you put it back in and it locks it back. I mean, they use it for, and then they would license the technology to, it's like similar to like what Amazon did with like their locker systems afterwards, but it was like,
Right.
that was one big thing. And then, they leased it out to like different ski companies, so you could lock your skis and stuff like that, and not having any have to do with anything else, keys or anything like that. So I found that
Yeah.
very interesting technology.
Very
And
useful too.
yeah, so I was like, oh, that's it's all over the place. And then one last one I saw that the fund invested into was you put in where you're going and it builds you out the itinerary. And I know this is much bigger now with AI, but I can't, like, all the information it provides to you, it's very detailed. I mean, you can put it into like, hey, where do I go when I'm in, like Rome, you know what I mean? Or whatever it is. But you put in like all the different things, and it learns exactly who you are and how you would travel. And then it builds out, and you're
Interesting.
like, I'm like, That's super cool because I do a lot of traveling. So people would ask me like where you go, and I keep all my like journals of where I've been, and I'll just like send them the things I did. But it's like it's with this, it's like, oh, you don't even need me anymore. You just put in there like this is what I want to do. I want to go to some wine bars. I want to have this. I want to eat that, whatever it is, and they'll just give you like a whole list. And I test out. I'm like, wow, this is like. So I thought that was really cool because like, I mean, that's just something you go to all these websites that we'd utilize for years, hotel websites and
Right.
like airline websites, and they never, yeah,
Travelocity, like all the yeah.
and they never had like, what do you want to do? I mean, now they have this thing where like, oh, you're going to, you're going to Dallas. Do you want a rental car? You know what I mean? Great,
Right.
that's great technology, right? But it's like it's a different thing if you're like putting in your things or it knows who you are and you're telling them what you want to do there and it builds your itinerary for like 5 days and nights. You know what I mean?
Wow.
To get
Is
back to your
this
boat.
company still around? Do you know?
Yeah, it is. It is. I'll have to check the sheet. I'll email it to you.
Yeah, I'm just
But
curious. Like, is it live? Like, is it
this
on the
stuff
market for
it's
consumers?
yeah,
That's
yeah,
cool.
it's intoxicating, isn't it?
Yes. I'm like, wow, that's cool.
I'll have to pull it up through my Google sheet. I would say it now, but like that's one thing off the top of my head. And there's like all different types of ones. One's assisting you with moving, like stuff like that that people hate doing, and assists you with putting everything
Right.
together that you need for doing it, and stuff that you do like once in a while, and you maybe aren't the best at. You know what I mean? Because after somebody doesn't move, you can ask them about them, like they'll tell you all the mistakes they made, but 5 years later when they move, they forgot all that, right? So
Right.
interesting
And
stuff of
moving
where
is one of
people's
those
heads
ones.
at.
Yeah, no one wants to move. You're just like, oh, can I just like taxes? Can someone just do this for me? Who can I pay to do all this?
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
Oh, so all the prop tech. I mean, we'll get back to what our previously scheduled program. The how did you get into real estate, Charles?
So my quick like 1 or 2 minutes is that I grew up in a real estate investing family. My dad bought his first multifamily property a few months after I was born. It was a six family, and then he built that. This is in like the mid '80s. He built that with a partner. Some of them owned himself, some with a partner. He had no syndication, and he built it up to like 100 units, and he started selling it off in
Oh
like the late
wow,
'90s. Now they were a lot of like D and C class, like low C class. Let's be nice, C minus properties, and but they were extremely difficult. And if property, we were talking about how bad property management was before, but property management so bad with like low, less ideal properties is that you really have to do it yourself. I mean, you can't hand over a property like this to a manager. It would just be a firestorm kind of a thing.
a
So
lawsuit waiting
he
to happen.
yeah, it's just like it's a different way of how you have to manage poor properties like that. And you try your best, but it's really like you patch stuff, you don't really fix it. You know what I mean? And I know that sounds very slumlordish, but it's just how these properties operate. It's a whole different thing of when you get into better properties and something breaks and you can actually afford to fix it. You know what I mean? And that means
Correct.
for the property or the money that you have coming in that you can utilize for fixing something, but it's also for the timeline and the life of what that you're fixing too. So if you have a tenant there that doesn't care as much about your property as you do, um, or really doesn't care about it, let's just say for these type of properties, you might not be putting as much money back into something that you might have to replace again in 24 months, whereas another property, it might last 12 years. You know what I mean? So
Right.
it's just how it works. So that was terrible. I was like, oh, I would go there twice a week, and that was like my second education of learning, dealing with tenants, collecting rent. I collected rent in elementary school. My dad would sit in the car, like, because he had like a team of people that would collect. He had like a couple people, superintendents that would collect rent, and some of them like people that outstanding. He would go and collect, and he'd be like, okay, run upstairs to like third, tell them they're going to give you cash. Run down here, I'll give you a receipt. Run it back up. So that was my whole thing of like collecting rent from
That's
elementary
awesome.
school on. Dealing with contractors, buying supplies, dealing with roof, the whole 9 yards of everything that went with it. And it's pretty terrible. And then I read a book going into high school, Art of the Deal by Donald Trump, and that kind of changed my whole idea on it. I was like, oh, it's like not every apartment is like this, and like there's different real estate than this. And I kind of got the bug during it. And when I got out of college, I bought my first property, and my dad had been stressing me to buy in better areas, which was fantastic advice. He started taking that advice himself later on too. But the thing that was that I bought a three-family property. We call it house hacking now, but we didn't have a name back in '06 for it really. And that was really living in one floor, renting out the other two. I bought at the end of '06, so it was like getting to the end of everything. And then I bought another three-family like at the end of '08, and it was like remember October 1st because it was 2 weeks after Lehman went under, and it was just blood
Oh
in the streets.
no.
It was like blood in the streets every day, and it was like a month
Yes.
before. It's like a month and a half before Madoff went. So like every time you turn on CNBC, if you were brave enough, you would see someone else going out of business or something not lending, or it was just. I
Completely.
mean,
We had a bracket in the
it was just
office on like
insane. Yeah.
who's gonna win and lose, and
I talked to someone, they're like, "Oh, I got approved for Countrywide." Then like a week later, Countrywide's like out of like Countrywide's not loaning, and then like a week later, Countrywide's out of business or got purchased or something. So you're
right.
like, I mean,
Wells
it was
Fargo, I
just
think.
yeah, yeah, or Bank of America or whatever it was. I
Something like
mean,
that,
they just
right.
one of the big guys, they came in and they like I don't know, righted the ship or did something. I don't know, but it was just it was a mess. If I knew any better, I probably wouldn't have been investing, but I didn't. And I was buying just for cash flow stuff, and that's what saved me because I had longer term debt on those properties, and I was buying for cash flow. And then I bought my first commercial property in '09 and kind of went from there. I managed all those properties myself from '06 to 2012. Like you said before, it's a
Wow.
thankless job. Um,
Buck
and
stops with you, right?
It was, as I got to the end of it, I moved to Florida in 2012. So I had to put professional management. And then I had this portfolio of properties I had put together over these 6 years. And I sold them all to an investor out of New York City in the beginning of 2022. These were all from where I was originally from in central Connecticut. And, but it was one of those
Nice
things
exit.
that it
22.
was, yeah.
Nice exit.
Yeah, it was. I had a property manager that was retiring, a really good property manager that was retiring at the end of 2021, and luckily, that kind of pushed me into selling them. I probably wouldn't have done it. So, but it was
Top of the
good because
market.
yeah, thanks to him. Yeah, great property
Yeah.
manager.
Congrats. That's awesome.
One of my best property managers I've ever had. But the thing though is that he was it took a lot of things off my plate because I had it like with assistants and everything at the time and contractors that helped me run it. And my thing was really just like collecting rent and kind of like letting people into properties. And all my stuff was really close. All my properties were within a half mile of each other. That's how I bought them. So it was very easy to manage. And but yeah, that gave me the whole like foray into what I'm doing now. And like, so since like 2018 on, I've been in Florida since 2012 and really since 2018, buying properties with passive investors and syndications. And that's really what I've been focusing on and what we've been doing here at Harborside Partners.
So it's such a great story and
Thank you.
such a great exit. Like 2022, just watching the market, it's like COVID wasn't quite over and interest rates were like 3%, right? So the cap rates were like low. Sellers, it was a seller's market all over the place. That was amazing time to get out.
Yeah, it was. I
So
also had.
congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it was also like Connecticut had some. I had some tenants that weren't paying rent for like a year plus, and I couldn't get them
Oh,
out.
because
And
of
so it
COVID.
was like, so I was like waiting to get these people out and get them like re-rented and like season it a little bit before I sold it. And it was just like, I mean, it was just a mess up there. Not like Florida was much easier to run your properties, and that was one of the reasons too. Like, okay, now I only invest in like landlord-friendly states, so it's just like make my life so much easier. And I think other people have these war stories too that were in other states that, I mean, you're in California, so it's
Lest we talk
even
about the
worse.
worst of all the states. Yeah, I mean,
California,
it's
New
like
York,
one or
right?
two, California or New York. I don't know who's worse. I think New York City proper is worse,
Oh
but
yeah.
as a state, I'm not sure how the states on that stuff because Los Angeles City and City of New
Yeah.
York are pound for
Pretty
pound
similar.
the
Pretty
absolute
similar.
most communist, like anti-landlord. Yes, I said it on the air. Like, I don't invest in the city of Los Angeles, nor should anybody else,
Yeah.
unless you live here and know exactly what you get into. Like, call somebody
Yeah.
you know because it's the laws are crazy, crazy.
I had a friend that was a real estate broker handling mostly rentals in New York City, and he would say the underwriting that goes into the properties, and it just hurts the renter on the back end because he's like, you got to be from the tri-state. So for people that don't know, the tri-states, typically Connecticut, New Jersey, New York. So if you're not from that
Okay.
area, it's hard for them to go after you. So number one, you've got to do it. You got to make 30 times what rent is monthly, and if you're not from the tri-state, you got to make 60 times. And even if you're
Oh
not from the
wow,
tri-state, they might not even rent you if you have like a signer or something. And like people would come to him with like a year of rent, and like, nope, because we don't know what's going to happen on month 13, so we won't take that. You know what I mean? And you're like,
wow,
you've been burnt. I can tell when I talk to a landlord and I'm like, I know someone that's been burned. I'm like, you've been burnt because
over and over.
those when you will leave an apartment back then, let's say it was $3,000 a month or whatever for one of these apartments several years, 8 years back. But I mean, when you're letting that thing just go vacant, I mean, for these months, what it costs to evict them, and then it just scares me even more. I'm like, oh, I don't even want to deal with it.
Right.
Whereas in the regular place, you can, we can be a little bit more open. It makes it easier for renters that have low blemishes because now you're like, I'll take a risk on you. Instead, it's 1 month. We're going to take 2 months. You know what I mean? You're a little lower here, and we can do this. Your job, blah blah blah. We verified this. It's fine, and it's a win-win for everybody. I can rent it out easier because I know you'll leave easier, right? And it's also someone that might have had a checkered past, whatever that might be, whether financially or criminally or both.
Right.
We'll let it go. You know what I mean? But it becomes more difficult when I can't get you out, and then it just hurts the renter because now I got to let that thing sit there, so it hurts me. But now you can't rent, even if you're the most qualified person ever,
And that is one of the core arguments against rent control, because what you said right there, and we've been battling rent control in California for forever, right? So we just shot down another one, the fourth attempt to go like statewide
Nice.
full
Yeah,
rent
I heard that.
control. We got machine gunned over here again. The fourth time it's gotten shot down. We still have a somewhat of a statewide rent control, which is like called AB 1482, which is like CPI plus 5%. But this other one was going to lock it down to like give everybody, like any city set their own limits and get rid of what's called the Costa Hawkins, which didn't let any buildings over past 1996 be in under rent control. So if you're a
Um,
developer, you could charge whatever you wanted. If that last one, 33, would have went through, developers could have been faced with a ceiling at the onset. Like you can only charge this much, being told by a city what they could charge. So it was going to kill everything.
I think
And we've
San
had,
Francisco has something like that too, right? If it's built before a certain age. I remember I was researching it one time for a podcast episode, and it was like before a certain year. I don't know which way. I don't remember
it's
it now, but
1978 in Los Angeles.
yeah,
That's RSO, and it's
yeah.
probably similar.
I think
But Costa
80s. Yeah,
Hawkins says it can't go. Cities can set rent control. If it's when Costa Hawkins Act went through in 1996, as I understand it, it stopped anyone who had any city that had rent control in place already. It locked that and didn't allow
yeah.
them to change it, so they couldn't move the year, and it didn't let anyone else put rent control in place that was more imposing than what was already there. They couldn't put like a year. They couldn't say anything past. They couldn't go past 96. So like, for instance, Inglewood and Culver City, those are two cities that put rent control in place kind of sneakily during COVID, and they could not say. They could only say buildings after 1990, buildings from 1996 and before are under rent control, but they couldn't go into any of the new construction
Yeah.
because of Costa Hawkins now. If this
Yeah.
prop would have went through, all that would have gone away, which
Yeah,
would have
and then
been
you never have
anarchy.
new supply. Yeah, it's funny. I met someone at a real estate conference a few years back, and their specialty was buying rent control buildings in New York. And I was like, oh, I talked to him because everybody, he sounds insane, right? This person, but what he knew is they knew
Wow.
the law. He had like a law firm, like he was part of a law firm, obviously, law firm. So they figured out exactly how to do it. So
If he's
they
getting
would
free
know.
legal advice because he's a lawyer, that's different, a little bit different.
So they'll track the utility bills, they'll track the mail because there's a lot of fraud with rent
Mail.
control, and so they'll know like Miss Jones, why does it say like Mickey Rodriguez on this or whatever, you know what I mean? That's mail from Amazon, who's really living here, and they can, you know what I mean, and they can
Yeah,
just.
subleasing. Mm-hmm.
And at that point, they can just start breaking. So they can buy these properties. No one else wants them, or they're going to pay extremely, low returns, right? Or you're going to get low value for it. But like they can take it over, and there's quite the value add when you sit there for years and then just find out every person that's illegally. They must know the percentage of these buildings that are typically,
Wow.
illegal, and they just go through and they're, you know what I mean? Like a package
How
gets
do,
dropped here. You know what I mean? Oh yeah, we're
how do
dropping a
they, are they
package
like
off there.
watching cameras? Like, how do they even track that? I mean, it's hundreds of units of tracking mail. It's interesting.
I just whatever he was doing, it was I think the mail is just one thing, but it's a different thing of like people show how they can
Smart.
because your name is on a bunch of stuff when you get into an apartment, you know what I mean? So no
Correct.
matter what you are, you're getting junk mail, you're getting names, you're getting you know what I mean? Like people everybody listening to this probably if you're in America, you probably are getting mail from someone else that doesn't live at your address or lived there
Right.
before or whatever it was. So I mean, all this
So
stuff
true.
can be, yeah. But anyway, they had a niche and I had to applaud him at that. I still think he was crazy, but he made money, and I guess that's what the whole business is about, right?
That is, I mean, if you can find a niche and stick into that, and like, the riches are in the niches, right? I mean, if you have I've also seen a couple of clients have a similar business model and do the same thing because they're banking on the the bell curve on the younger people coming in moving sooner because they're coming in market rate. They would eventually move within a year or two, or then the people who are in rent control eventually they would age out, or they would
Hmm.
move on, or they'd been in there for 30 years and it was like they're going to retire and go on. So they had a probability and a whole bunch of math sitting around those kinds of buildings.
When does this guy
And
move to Boca Raton? Yeah.
right, exactly. There's that, right? Because you could just take your California money and go to Florida, like what I know retires does. But it's just and they stick to it. But the idea was the way they were successful is that they stuck to it, and you had to just, and it was over a long enough timeline and a big enough sample size of units, it worked out. But with one building, you couldn't sit there and wait for that to happen. It had to be over 500-600 units, and then you're
Yeah.
working. Because in Los on the West Coast or in Southern California, what a lot of people don't understand is that we actually have a lot of smaller buildings. We don't
Hmm.
have the massive 400 unit buildings like you do in the East Coast because it's the West Coast is younger. We just don't have the history, right? The 1880s, the soonest anything real big here in California happened, especially in Los Angeles. And there's so much land, so we just built out. It's just sprawl across 42
Yeah.
cities in like something in Los Angeles, and there is a downtown, but they're not condos and apartments. They're office buildings and condos. They're not apartment buildings. The apartment buildings are like
Right.
8 units, 12 units, and a scattered site. A lot of that. We manage like 1,300 doors, and our average unit size is about 40 built units. And,
Oh, okay.
and depending on like the area, like in Long Beach, where our headquarters is, for whatever reason, they were building 8 units and 12 units. That's all they built back in the 50s, 60s. 8 unit or
Hmm.
12 unit. 8 unit, 12 units. That's all it. There was no, because they didn't need to. They had all this land.
Yeah.
Just kept going.
Yeah, it
So
makes perfect sense. A
it's
lot less
different.
expensive to construct that. Yeah.
Right, right. And you had land and yards and things like that, which is changing, obviously, because
Not
there's no
anymore.
inventory
Yeah.
now. It's like now we need more. We're massive supply shortage here and getting worse because
Yeah.
it's getting more expensive to build, all the red tape, etc. We can get into it, but yeah, California is one of those places where you can absolutely make money, but you got to have the right team and you got to know somebody here who knows what they're doing. Like I would like so advise like any new investors on this side, either partner with a GP that's living there, knowing someone and doing something in that area or a property management company, or go to like someplace like Florida and cut your teeth there or call you. There's just laws on laws on laws that it's so stacked up against landlords. It's crazy. It's like, how
Yeah.
would you expect us to even do business? So, but if you're, if you can move faster than the laws and know the laws and work within them, there's where you make the money, right? So you don't slumlord and it's all black and white. It's like either this or that. There's no, we absolutely have to take care of our tenants and you actually have to actually pay for that, Mr. Landlord. And so you have to raise enough money to know that. That's going to be
Right.
something you're going to have to pay for. If it's fire, life safety, we're fixing it. Like it's getting done. It's getting done and it has to be done to a minimum livable habitability standard or we're getting sued. Everybody gets sued.
Right.
So it's actually, that part works out. But the renovation part, the habitability issues exists because we can't raise rents.
Yeah.
Why would you, if you can't raise rents, why would you improve the place? It doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
yeah. I understand it from each side, and it does make sense from the first part. But then when you see it from the impact it actually has, or what the downstream
Right.
effect of it is, it just doesn't work. You know what I mean?
Right. Exactly. It seems to make sense. Like, and there is a housing crisis, and we're there with it. We just rent control is not the option.
No,
The,
it's not going to
the way
fix
to
it.
do it is to relax regulation, so we can build stuff that's not super uber luxury, and we can build some workforce housing or C-class stuff that's just code building and nice. It doesn't have to be, gold plated and top rents. We can actually build something that we can rent out at mid market. But right
Right.
now, that's all we can build. It's super high end, or we're renovating.
Yeah. Yeah. It's difficult because construction on the low end to the high end, I mean, a lot of it's similar. I mean, finishes are different,
Correct.
but I mean, like,
Still the
it's
same for wood. Still
yeah.
the same for copper.
It's actually true. Yeah.
You're right. It's commodity.
Yeah. So that's a problem. But I think where cities can come in and help is if they're doing take a tax credits on stuff like that. And I think that's one way that they can
And that
they
is
t yeah. That's the only way. Long-term tax credits on stuff like that, and tax abatements, whatever you want to call it, or however it works where you are. But I think that's the one way of doing it, because then it'll because it doesn't make sense if you can't because any developer is going to make as much money as possible. Obviously, development's extremely risky, right? It's somebody told me before,
Correct.
it's the venture capital of real estate. Do you know what I mean? Which it is,
It
as close as it can
absolutely
be.
is.
And you have something that takes 3 years to build, and if you're 2 years, 2.99 years into it, it still doesn't worth or doesn't make any money. You know what I mean? Has to be completed and has to, you got to pull your COs and you got to be rented. And that's why, we see now with all new deliveries of apartments out there, people are just like fighting to get their places to 90% so they can refinance them and or sell them to someone that can get permanent financing. No matter what it is, beds and heads, you know what I mean, kind of a thing, to get
Correct.
that done.
So correct.
Yeah. So I mean, it's difficult. I think the tax credit's the only way you're going to get people, entice developers to do projects, to to that B standard, right? Without going in there and having crazy finishes and stuff like this.
Absolutely correct. And so, and with that, and talking about lessons learned and things like that, what was what's the biggest or most important lesson you've learned, Charles, in your career with real estate?
Um, I think buy properties in better areas. I think that was a key thing. And every time that I like kind of reassess and adjust my criteria for underwriting and for buying properties, my investment strategy, it's always comes down to better properties, better areas. So, little newer properties. And I think it's a common trend I've seen over the decades from real estate investors. And when I got in there, you'd be like, oh, why are you buying all these? I'm getting, this unit here and doing this and get better returns. And then you realize later that, better properties are going to they're going to appreciate faster. There's going to be more buyers for those properties all the time. You know what I mean? And you're going to get more sophisticated capital behind them. Even in bad markets, you're going to have buyers for good properties in most situations. You know what I mean? They're not going to sell what they sold for in a good market. However, you're not going to sell some C minus apartment complex for anywhere near what you bought it for. You know what I mean? Or what it's valued. That's the stuff because there's no one wants to lend on that. In good sense. I mean, that area is not going to get better for, if it even does, for decades. And you have an old property that needs not just granite countertops or stuff like this. It needs like new plumbing, and it needs like new mechanicals and everything else that goes with it, which things don't add to the NOI. You know what I mean? They don't
Oh,
add increased rents. So I think that's where I found people in like the current area now, time frame now, that have had issues with lenders. The ones I've seen that go back to the bank are usually the poorer properties. The ones I've seen that have more successful with workouts with banks are better properties, because it's easier for the banks if you keep that occupancy high and they are doing what they're saying, these operators, even if they have to adjust the loan. A lot of these lenders are allowing that because they understand that in a year, 2 years, they're probably going to be able to recoup all their capital than writing it down now. You know what I mean? Because it's better properties, better areas. Those are where people want to live. They want to live for the longest periods of time. When people don't move from your properties in multifamily, that's where you make your money. I mean, that's the easiest way of keeping. If you keep people, you'll make more money. And that's just like, it's not rent increases. It is just not having the turnover.
correct. Every day's whatever your rental amount divided by 30, and that's what you're losing daily when that thing's
Yeah,
vacant.
exactly. Exactly.
100%. Goes back to the fundamentals, right? Location, location, location. Right? It really is. Where's that dirt located and how much is that dirt worth, not the structure?
Right.
Right? So we spoke a little earlier about the different types of asset classes and different types of things that you invest in. How do you evaluate opportunities across the broad spectrum we talked about, from across real estate, ag tech, not prop tech, but new tech properties? Where do you find the value, and what does that look like?
So for when I do like startup funding, I've put that as like it's less than 10% of like,
Okay.
my net worth, stuff like that. That's a very high risk type endeavor. And usually I'm not going out and actively doing this like I do multifamily. I kind of stay in my lane. I work with a partner like people would work with us that want to invest into passively into real estate. And I work off of their experience of decades of where they're investing, and I put, money alongside it. And that's how I've made my decisions, is partnering with people that know what they're doing. And I don't have any ambition to go out and start, talking to new companies and putting money in there and stuff like that. Maybe in the future, but not now. And it's something that it's you got to learn a whole new business. You know what I mean? So it's easier to stay in your lane, put money with people that understand exactly what they're doing, that have their niche down of what you're investing into, what they know for a while, and what they've been doing and what they've been successful in doing, and put money behind what they're doing. And I think that's the best way. And that's how I found, because I wouldn't be, if you're just, oh, I'm an angel investor or whatever it is, and you just like randomly are investing into businesses that you don't know anything. I mean, you're just,
You're playing the
you know, that,
lottery, right?
yeah, you might as well just go to the tables, because it's just one of
Yeah,
those
I was
things
gonna
where
say.
it's not going to work out. But if you're working with someone, you're going to that knows what they're doing, and this is with any type of asset class or any type of investment product. If they know what they're doing and they've had success doing it, you're going to have a better chance of success by aligning yourself with someone like that and putting money with them. So I like that idea, and that's how I've done it that way. When I'm passively investing in multifamily deals or other real estate deals, main thing with multifamily is the same thing we do. I vet the deals almost the same way that I would do an active deal that we're working on. And it really comes down to the area. That's the number one thing. You're checking the area, and then you're also breaking down, all the makeup of the area. So like the retailers around it, all that kind of stuff. And then you're also another thing I check out initially is like comparable rents. So they're telling me it's going to go to $1,500 in rents right now, or $1,250, and if we put this money into it, it's going to go there. And you look around and you see the apartments that are 1,500. Are they newer? Are they older? I mean, is this the same kind of finishes we're doing? Is the same amenities at the properties? And you kind of see what their comparables actually are. And usually they'll
Right.
give you like 10 comparables, and you might find one or two that actually are comparables. And then you can really use it, because you're looking at something like, oh, it's 2 bedrooms. Right, but 2 bedrooms over here, even if the same year, they're 600 square feet or 650 square feet. These over here are 800. I mean, that's night. It's what I mean, day and
Right.
night. That's not a comparable. That's apples and oranges.
Not at
So
all.
you really have to, and it's also I've had people tell me comparables 3 miles away. I mean, it might as well be in another state. You know what I mean? Because it
I
doesn't it
see.
doesn't it doesn't matter. It's I like when I say about my first property, my second property, I'm not that good of a golfer, but I could hit a ball between those two, and it was night and day on those properties. And like same sort of area, just they were just a little different. You know what I mean? The properties were a little different sized, but like you can't just say, "Oh, I always make money in that side of town or that area." No, it's very street by street. I had one going the other way. It was
Block by
completely
block.
different. Yeah.
So
So
true.
like if you're actively buying real estate and all this technology is great and we can utilize it to do stuff. But the thing though is that drive the neighborhoods, tell the broker you're trying to buy properties from, you've driven the area, and you'll know exactly what's going on, because a lot of times you're going to be like, oh no. And then drive the comparables and that you're looking at, and drive the properties you're actually, looking at too, and like put them together, because that's a dead giveaway. Because you can tell someone that's never gone out, you're like, this is nowhere near this over here. Or I go into one of them, this isn't even close. Now, if it goes the other way and we're comparing to properties that are not as nice as our property, well, that's different, right? You know what I mean?
Hmm.
That's a good way
Right.
of going. But most people are
Right.
going the other way, and they're trying to show me
Right.
that, hey, this is built in 1980, but that's over there built in 1990. But like, they're like the same. They're like the same.
I had someone tell me something built in 1986 was and something built in like 1979 or 80. They were like, oh, it's only 7 years apart. I'm like, the code changed in 84, right? Like, means
Yeah,
all the copper got thicker, all that it went from galvanized to copper. Like, there's a whole big difference of 7 years, at least here in California, because
yeah,
California code changed. There's no more galvanized, no more PVC. You got to the
yeah.
standards went up. So the difference between 1980 and 1987 was a whole bunch,
Well,
like
that's also
millions.
1977 versus 1980 or 1987, like that 10 years, because we got lead. So that's one
Right.
less thing.
Asbestos,
There,
right. Yeah.
there goes like a bunch of litigation. Your
Mhm.
insurance person's gonna sleep easier at night, and you don't have to worry
So
about
true.
kids ripping it off apparently and eating it. You don't have to sign the disclosures. I mean, all these things that people don't understand, that aren't, that like they have that information you have. I didn't know those years because I don't invest in California, but having that information now puts you ahead of all these other investors. So finding someone like you to invest into it, I mean, you're a pro in that area. That's exactly what you're looking for, because now my learning curve has now been, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Right, right. And it's like, and you don't know, and you can't even Google that. Like, how do you even know what
Yeah.
questions to ask? Right? It's like,
Yeah.
when
That's
did
something
California building codes change? And you just don't look into that.
those are things you'd hear from like old school real estate investors, and they'll
Right.
tell you that kind of stuff, and they'll be like, oh, they'll
My
tell you,
day.
and you ask them why, and they're like, I was talking to this old lender, this old hard money lender one time, and he was telling me, he goes, it's not really that difficult. He goes, I look back on my portfolio of who I loan money to, and if less than 10% of the deals are going bad, I know that I'm not aggressive enough. If more than 10% of the deals are going delinquent, I know I got to start tightening up my underwriting. I was like, oh, that's straightforward. That's straightforward. It works for you. I
Oh
like
my
that.
gosh.
So it's like, and
That's
if you told any banker, they'd probably like roll over and die. But it's his own
yeah.
money. It's worked for him, and I'm like, you have a system that works. I mean, that's all that matters, right? That's what we're all trying to get, right? A system that works for us.
But yet, if you and I tried to do it that way, it wouldn't work for us. You still
No,
can't
because
replicate. Yeah, it's something
you
to it,
probably you
right?
probably invest in like two towns, and that's like, or one town, and he knows it like the, you know what I mean? Um,
Right.
when I bought properties in one town, I mean, you could literally like, you're in a town for so many years. I was buying properties in like one town for so many years, and like 5 or 6 years into it, you would say get a picture of a property, and you'd have an idea of where it was in town. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because you've been
Right.
over it so much, and like that gives you an advantage versus anybody coming from out of state or out of town that doesn't even know. You're like, no, no, you don't want that part of it. Oh, there's problems. Or like I talked to I know somebody that used to own that property, problems with the roof all the time. You know what I mean?
Right. 10's still
So
in there, actually. The number 8 over there is still in there, and you don't want to mess with number 8.
yeah.
Let me see that rent roll. Oh, yeah. He's still in there? Pass. That's awesome. Charles, what's one of the common traits or strategies you've noticed among successful real estate investors from your podcast? You very prolific on your podcast. What's
I think for successful new investors, I would say for successful investors in general, I would say, it would be that they've picked an avenue and they stay in it. They know their lane and they know it really specifically. And when you know really good investors, I think it's something that you'll talk to them and you're like, hey, where are you buying properties? I buy them in Orlando. Oh, when you talk to a really good investor, they're like, I buy properties 7 to 35 units. I buy them in this part of Winter Garden and I buy them over here and I buy them, you know what I mean? And I make sure, and they have like, it's like a whole thing and they know it all off the top of their head. So you're like, if I'm a broker and I'm working on commission, who do you think's going to close? Some guy that's just like, I just buy in Orlando, anything, or versus this person over here that has it like really, they know exactly what they do. It's like the guy with the loans, right? He knows
right?
exactly what works for him, and that's all he does. And you're like, that's the person that I want to work with, and that's the person I want to put my money with, and that's the person I would put my time with if I was on a commission basis, such as a lender or such as a broker. Because people are always worried, oh, they're not going to send me stuff outside the box. Listen, if you tell them it's 5 to 35 units or whatever it is, they're going to send you something that just came up that's 38 units. Trust me. But the thing though is that it's going to be you've just now been moved to the top because you know what you're doing, and even if you have a short resume of that stuff, you know exactly what your buy box is, and you won't waste time with anything outside of it. And then I think for new investors being successful, three things: it's longer term debt, buying properties on cash flow, and having reserve funds.
Uh, don't. So you don't advise going straight in head on first day value add, huh?
You
You're going in with a renovation hat.
There's more, there's a lot of time in your career for doing heavy renovations. I had to go 3 properties before I did my heavy renovation, and I was luckily able to go from like 100 days, able to go from completely empty to 5 full apartments in that property. But I mean, that's not something I had
Congratulations,
to.
by the way. That's a pretty good quick timing.
Yeah, it was just, but it's thank you. But the second one I did, it was like, nope, not ready for heavy stuff yet. And I didn't have the time for it, didn't have the contacts for it. It takes time for you to build the contacts. It takes time. I mean, no matter I speak to some other private lenders and they'd be like, when somebody comes in there and they have like $100,000 renovation, that's a big, big project. You know what I mean? On a house. This person has to have fantastic finances, a fantastic track record to do it because they see deals that go bad all the time. And I
Right.
mean, flipping house, it's similar to renovate, where we got the same people coming over, you know what I mean, to the house to fix stuff, to do stuff. So it's like, when you're going into stuff, just do something, do small value adds, get stuff that's already cash flowing. You can do a little work to it. It's not going to be it's not going to be a grand slam, but we're just looking for like singles and doubles. And then you'll hit that grand slam. But like, that's after you have like a solid team together, not just like, oh, I talked to this contractor. He's going to be a great addition to my team. Well, you've never used him before. I don't know if I can add him, you know what I mean? But you can't just like buy a property and like bring him over there and he's disappeared. So you need people that you've worked with before in the trades to be on your team when you start taking on these really, really heavy lifts.
So true. I think you hit something on that people don't discuss very much, Charles. It's the quality of your network when it comes to real estate as well, because contractors, as you just said, like they will disappear. People don't understand that. I don't, not even sure I quite understand it myself, but and how and why. But they'll be there one day, and next day their phone is disconnected, and they were a licensed contractor, and where'd they go? Nobody knows, and they just left. Maybe
Yeah.
you might even owe them money, and they're gone. It's
Yeah.
like,
Worst case
okay,
scenario. Worst case scenario, they're working two or three other projects, and they're like, "I'll be
right,
at your project twice a week," and you're like, "What are you
right,
talking
on
about?
Saturdays and Sundays, right?
I got a loan that's like 12% interest or something crazy. Like, you got to come over here and I mean,
I
like
mean, sitting
that's
his
the
crew
problem.
like three to five p.m. every day, like going like, wait a minute, I'm the after hours job. No,
So yeah, these are all things that you wouldn't know, but you can test them out with your first thing. With the hey, we're just doing
hmm
over a bathroom out at this property I just bought. You know what I mean? And it's vacant. And you're like, oh, that was a mess. Never do it again. Or you had somebody else that came in like he was a little bit more expensive, but like, yeah, this guy this is really good. Do you do a bigger project? And then like that's how you kind of figure it out. And I had people like that. You have different people at different levels. Like this is like a handyman. Like I know people that would be like, this is like a handyman, like a 1 day job person. If he starts
uh-huh.
coming on a second day, that's when like stuff falls apart, right? And then you have other people that are like really professional that can come in there and like hammer out like jobs correctly. You know what I mean? In like a week or 2 weeks. But then you have people who are like, no, this is like he fixes like little stuff. You know what I mean? He's not like we're not bringing it in for like big jobs, and that's how you build your team.
Totally.
You know who to call. You know what I mean? But he's not going to charge me much when if I have to send him over there for doing like for snaking some drains or something at 8 p.m. So
All right, and he'll probably enter the phone call for callbacks, most likely. Maybe not though. And it's but hey, I didn't pay him that much, so I'll just call a different plumber. No big deal.
yeah.
It's like that kind
And
of thing.
hopefully, and
Completely.
hopefully, hopefully, if he picks up, he's somewhat sober to snake that drain.
Oh, you've had those too, huh?
I had one guy. I love this guy. He's sober now, but he actually came to my wedding, and he worked in my properties, and we'd have to be putting in furnaces, and like the day before furnaces, he'd hang out at this Polish club, and I'd have to call the bartender. I'm like, you gotta stop serving this guy. Like, you know what I mean? I have to come down there. I'm gonna come down there and stop. Of course, they never stop serving him. So I'm like, I'm gonna be at your house, man, like 8 a.m., dude. I'm coming to get you at 8 a.m., and I'm not letting off the horn until you come out, man. So, days of property
Oh,
management,
what? Oh my
fantastic.
God,
He
it's
did
so
good.
funny and so true.
When we got him there, he did good work. He was great, and he was a
But,
funny guy, really nice guy. But he's been sober for like 10 plus years. But it's
uh, good for him.
he, yeah, but I've had to deal with that. It's an interesting thing, right?
It's I mean, construction is very much akin to like kitchen work. It's very pirate. That's very piratical. It's very like cash basis. There's a lot of people who are like under the radar,
Oh
illegal.
yeah,
Maybe they don't got their papers. Everything's like, discount if giving cash. And it's to this day. Contractors
it's
give you
true.
10% discount if you pay them in cash, and cash is not illegal on our side. What they do with it, I don't ask. They got their workman's comp and they got their license. That's all we need
Yeah,
to know. What they do with it after that, why they get
yeah.
a 10% discount, right? Yeah, but we all know. Tell me, Charles, how has your experience in tech influenced your real estate investing?
Oh man, that's a good question. I've never been asked that. I would say it's a little different in that I mean it's very different, but there's certain similarities to it. And I think some of the similarities are you understanding that I think they're both businesses, and people that buy real estate and don't think it's a business are number one incorrect. And when they don't think they're tenants or clients, that's also another one that's incorrect. So if you're investing into a SaaS business or whatever. So something where you have a recurring membership, similar to people renting apartments from you. You still have to provide them with all of this service. You have to make sure that they're maintaining it and they're gonna stay with you, whether it's renew or whether they don't cancel you this month, whatever it might be. So I think really serving your clients, your tenants, and everything has to be fair. And that's one thing I learned about. It's one benefit I had about working with like C minus type properties and C properties myself when I started, because you're always kind of working a deal and you're trying to like. As you get into better properties, you don't have to do that. And that's one of the benefits of it. But it's one of the things is that you have to be very fair So property managers, as you know, as a property manager, it's very difficult to be completely by the books and make money when you get into lower class properties. You know what I mean? It's very important. It's like a negotiation with a lot of tenants every month.
All the
So
time.
being fair about explain to them, I fix this, you pay rent, like this is how it works, and letting people know. And I've had a lot of tenants that said, that really said I was one of their best landlords they had, and not because they walked all over me, but it was fair. You know what I mean? You're being fair with people, and you give people like a little. I always let people slide on like the first late fee and stuff like that. I never told them that initially, but being fair with certain things, and then before enforcing it, and then I think it's important that you have to put your foot down. You'll be more respected for it, but I think the same things between them is a lot of these businesses. Knowing that both of them are actually businesses. Real estate's not just an investment; it's also a business
Oh,
that needs to be managed.
absolutely.
And clients or tenants, whatever you want to call them, they're people that give you money. And the thing with like when we're talking about property management is that everybody talks about, hey, I got this $30 million apartment building. But when you talk to the person that's actually dealing with those clients, it's not the guy that raised all the money. The person that's actually dealing with them is someone you're paying like $40,000 or $50,000 a year for, right? Not a highly paid job that's
100%.
managing all of this. So that group on the ground or that customer service at that SaaS company, whatever it might be, it's super important. You know what I mean? That they are managing expectations. Managing expectations is a big thing about property management too, but just like managing the client correctly so that, hey, we're being fair. This is what we said we're going to fix. That's not broken, what you're telling me. We're going to get someone out there. This isn't a huge emergency, but we're going to get someone out there within 24 hours. You know what I mean? It's not like a one
Right.
hour emergency. And I think having that communication is where you can stop a lot of problems before they start. The people that are like, "Oh, I don't answer on the weekends," I'm like, "Oh my God, you are in for a nightmare." Because just respond back to them, no matter what it
Gave
is,
me
and be
like
like,
a
"I got
slight
this."
heart attack. I was like, whoa, like in California, be in jail.
I mean, but like if you just respond by, "Hey, I got this," whatever, and if it's like water pouring out of the walls or something, obviously we're going to be over there much sooner. But like if it's like, the shade doesn't come down or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, hey, like when my guy's over there in the next couple of days, like he'll take care of that. You know what I mean? But like, come on, let's be. And usually, if you respond and you like tell them you're going to take care of it, blah blah blah, in these days, it's fine. You know what I mean? Very rare you'll get someone
Right.
that's that hot headed. Yeah.
Most humans are
Yeah.
reasonable. Like this is
Yep.
5%. All right. But even any class,
True.
we're
It's
all
very
humans,
true.
and they're people are going to be reasonable. They're just in general, they're going to see reason once explained. But
Yeah.
you hit on it. The communication has to
Yeah.
be there, and it needs to be there within a reasonable amount of time. Now, what I think is reasonable and you think is reasonable might be different than what a tenant thinks is reasonable. A tenant thinks same day, same hour. So you better have yourself a good after hours call line. So even
Yeah.
if they have an emergency and it's not really an emergency, you want them to be able to talk to someone, because
Yeah.
the thing that's going to really get you in trouble or piss off your client slash tenant is voicemail. Yeah, when something's happening.
And I think, but that's also part of the property managers, leasing persons. They should be
Mm-hmm.
setting these expectations. Before I handed off my properties to property management, initially, I had a cover sheet that I would hand out the tenants on top of their leases. And it'd be a simple thing. If it was like a small house and you had to take out your trash, hey, this is the day trash goes out. This is your late fee. I'd like manually write it in there with a permanent marker. I had all these different things. This is where you call. This is how you pay your rent, blah, blah, blah.
Here's your
And
utilities.
yeah, and like this is a problem. These are like, let me tell you what an emergency is. Let me tell you what non-emergency, and this is what the time frame is for it. You know what I mean? And you set all that stuff up front, and I mean, it's like this is how it works. You know what I mean? And
Give them the tools.
I hope you stay here for as long as period. And it's just how it is. And I
And
find that is
thank
the
you for
best
your
way.
business, by the way,
Yeah,
client. I mean, it's like there is that. It's like I think a lot of landlords forget that part, right? So
yeah,
it's not us against them. We're in partnership with our residents. That's how we take it. That's how I
yeah.
take it. It's like if you're going to pay your rent on time, I'm going to fix your stuff on time.
Well,
And if that's
you got
in general,
Trevor. We're being recorded. You always got to fix your stuff on time. Come on. So
right. Well, if your
yeah,
squeaky hinge, but if it's not fire life safety, it
true,
might be like
true.
you said, right? Your squeaky hinge is going to get fixed quicker if you're paying rent on time, because if it's not absolutely required by law, how you get it has to be deprioritized generally, unless you're like a tenant that's like always prepaying, always on time. There is something to that. Customer service comes with good customers.
Yeah. The
So
main thing
yeah,
is just it's you get somebody that's like heated up after work or something like that, and they send the text, whatever. You get back to them, and it's
Completely.
very calm, and then smooth sailing for a couple of days. You've bought yourself 3 days, and then you can send someone over there, and that's usually because
100%.
most people aren't insane, so it's fine.
No, it's just communication. Say, hey, you know what? Like, is this something that needs to happen right now? And they'll be like, well, I could probably wait. And you're like, okay, fair. I'll send somebody.
Um,
And it's
uh,
just getting back to them. But it's when they get ignored and they go all weekend and you got a smoking a bomb on this Monday or Sunday when you
yeah.
finally do get in touch with them. They've called every health person in the whole county and you have everybody knocking on your door.
And you'll get people
Uh,
like that anyway. Yeah, there was no smoke detector here.
no,
There wasn't this. I mean, you'll
of
get that
course,
anyway.
of course.
But I mean, I mean, some things you can avoid, some things you can. So it's just
Right.
that should be in like your vetting process. But a lot of these problems get kind of weeded out as you get into better properties.
Correct.
I found not
Yeah,
all of them, but you'll get most of them will. So another reason for buying better properties in better areas, right?
correct. Right. Or renovating your properties to make them,
Yeah.
if you have the ugliest property on the block, making it better so it's up to par with the rest of the neighborhood. Neighborhood
Oh
will
yeah.
thank you, and you'll get a better quality tenant in there who will appreciate the renovations and pay for the rents you're looking for because they'll
Yeah.
appreciate what you've done if you do it right.
Yeah. The true value add. Yeah.
The true value add, right, exactly. You're actually adding value. It's the forced value add, but you're actually adding value to the tenant and the neighborhood. Literally, you're right.
True.
And then last question before we go into our rapid fire round here, Charles. As a mentor to other real estate investors, which you had mentioned, what advice would you give to someone just starting out in building a portfolio, like just starting a syndication in today's real estate market?
So if you're just starting out in real estate, I think I mentioned this earlier, but I would just say, longer term debt, buy properties that cash flow and have a reserve
Right?
fund, like a good reserve fund. If you're getting into syndications,
Explain the reserve fund a little bit. Can
yeah.
you might go
So
into that a little bit?
so when I say long-term debt, obviously if you're buying like a 2 to 4 unit property, you can get 30-year term. Okay, so obviously that's very long-term debt. But if we're buying, say, commercial properties, commercial multifamily, 5+ units, you go to your bank and they're going to offer you, probably a 5, a 7, and 10 year. If you're a little, worried about what's happening, get a 10-year loan, right? There's going to be some sort of prepayment penalty, as I found with them. Usually, you can work with them. They might try to do it long, but usually, I found most prepayment penalties around like 3 years. You can get it down there. So you hold it for 3 years, you don't have to pay it. Yes, you'll pay a little bit of higher interest rate. Then the last thing is the reserve fund. And so if you're going to a property and you're doing, say, a value add, and you think it's going to say $50,000 in renovations, make sure you have like 20% or more of that, and then have a reserve fund on top of it. So if your mortgage payment is, $4,000 a month, whatever it might be, I would have like 6 months of that or something, at least 3 months, whatever it is, like put aside. And the key is with the reserve fund is add to it every month. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
when you have that line that's like capital expense, which you won't really have all these like fancy lines on small properties because they get left off by mom and pop investors. But when you have like, there should always be money that's going back into the reserve fund and that's used for like capital improvement. So when you're putting in things that are lasting more than a year or whatever it might be. So when we're doing roofs, when we're doing appliances, whatever it might be, bathrooms, this type of stuff. And then when you go into a property or you're walking it, know that, okay, I know the roof it's going to have to be replaced within 5 years. Okay. So I have an idea of what this roof's going to cost, right? $25,000. So I know I'm going to put away an extra $5,000 a year, right? Or $6,000 a year, whatever it might be. And that goes right to the reserve fund. And, so like, okay, every time I'm taking rent from people, you know what I mean? I know I'm going to put this much more money, right? Extra $400, whatever it is, every month into this account. And so keep on padding that. And, you don't really need to have one for every, as you get into big properties, you'd have like an extra, you have this additional funds for every property. But as a small landlord, if you're just dealing with some duplexes and quads, how I had it, I just had one savings account and that would be the reserve fund. So that thing all I had to do was just for real estate stuff. So when something happens, when the property manager calls you and tells you have to write a big check next month or whatever it is, or something, you know what I mean? It's not a huge problem. You just go into the account, you can take it out, you can get it fixed immediately, and that keeps your tenants happy, right? And it makes sure like they're not going through the winter without heat, right? God forbid, or
Right.
hot water or whatever the stuff. So when you do that, then you're coming off as now being, hey, you're going to get your rent usually faster after that, and you're going to get people to respect you more because you took care of your end of the bargain. And most tenants really can't really test their landlord to that degree of writing a big check that quick. So mom and
Right.
pop ones, right?
Right. And back to what we said, 95% of people, maybe 90, depending where you are, what kind of asset class, are reasonable, good people.
Yeah,
They're going to do
true.
the right thing to most degrees. And if you're in there quick, they can't fault you. They can't fault you for fixing something
Right.
fast. And you can, and it's the law of reciprocal return. That always exists with all humans, right? Like if I give you something without you giving me something, then you're going to feel like you owe me something a little bit. So
Right.
that might be a little bit of grace of on their side on the next time something goes that's not as big of an emergency. I completely
Right.
pick up what you're putting down. Great perspective, Charles. Thank you. And that's a very succinct way of putting. I've never heard anyone explain the reserve fund. You see those on performas, you see those on your worksheets, like the reserve per unit $200 or whatever. And I don't think I've ever had anybody actually do it. I actually put it into a savings account. Like you put it's on your performance and it's on there. It's like, all right, it's part of the whole calculation. Where does it sit? It
Yeah.
sits in the operating, but you've actually put it in somewhere. That is an awesome key takeaway to anyone listening to this that's coming into this. Put it into a separate account. Like make that thing automatic withdrawal into something besides your operating fund for the LLC that you buy your building in, because that
True.
will save your
Exactly.
butt when something happens. Especially if you're only the only investor, making a capital call to yourself, and you're the one that's on the hook for it.
Right.
Yeah, when you're syndicating, a little bit different, and you're only going to be partially, but it's still a phone call that no syndicator wants to make. You hear that word, you're like, you don't want to call all your investors and be like, we need X amount to fix that thing that we didn't think was going to go out. Hot water heater, roof, plumbing, whatever. It's not a good look. You don't want to wear that for too long or very often. So thank you. So that brings us right to the end of our time here. And last thing we have left is what I like to call the rapid fire round. And I'm just going to ask you a series of questions, Charles. You can answer as long or as short as you like, and say whatever you like. I want to try to be quiet. Try. I'm not going to expound, and I'm not going to question. Your show, Silent Mike. Are you ready, sir?
Yes.
All right. Charles, what's your favorite city to invest in?
Um, I love Tampa. Tampa is one of my favorite cities to invest in.
Morning routine must have.
Um, Morning routine, espresso.
Amen. What's one book recommendation you have to real estate investors?
I'd say to anybody in business, especially sales, and I say 80/20 principle. Um, Fantastic book. And you can utilize it in all parts of your life. And anything you really do for work, you don't have to be an entrepreneur. You don't have to be a real estate investor. You pick it up, and it's one of those books you'll read a little bit, you put it down, and you amazed at how much it really aligns with your life.
What's your favorite failure?
Um, I think passively investing into deals where I lost money and realizing going back into them and figuring out that a lack of due diligence was my problem. And then I think another part too is this is an odd way of saying this, but even though you make money on deals, it doesn't mean it was a good deal. And I think realizing that that's a difficult one to think about. Think about that one, right? Because you look at it and you're like, oh, this, you hear people, you'll hear, they know it inside too. They just won't say it. And they're like, oh, this is like a really tricky deal, but we got it done. You're like, it was a bad deal and you got lucky on it because I've done that before too. You know what I mean? And knowing that is, it's half the battle, right? Of what you're doing. It's like knowing it, and then next time you go through and be like, that was close, not doing that again, right? To yourself. Even if it's, hopefully that's with your own money, but it's something that I think knowing deals that you did that maybe you made money on that were still bad deals, and then knowing what you did wrong with those deals, and also what you did wrong with deals where you lost money. And you'll see how many different similarities there are between those of what you did, because maybe you found that one sucker that grew, that was born that was going to buy that property for you for too much more than it should have been sold for.
Oh, love that. That's some straight Yoda stuff right there, Charles. Sorry, I'm not supposed to go. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Focus. I mean, focus is power. It's just it is what it is. Whatever you're doing, whenever you focus, whenever you've been successful somewhere, you look back and you've probably taken a lot of things off your plate.
And last question. If you could have dinner with anyone, live, dead, or imaginary, who would it be?
Oh man. I like to have dinner with Sam Zell. He passed away about a year ago, but a huge real estate investor, and he stayed in his lane. He never did developments. He just focused on what he did. He bought real estate when it was good prices, and then when there wasn't real estate, he did one other thing. He bought businesses, and those two things he did. But he never like got out of his lane of like developing or anything like that. And I think it's a tough thing for people that are really successful and they need a new challenge. And he didn't really need that challenge, and I really appreciate that. It's really important because it's something that a lot of people, especially entrepreneurs, we get the shiny object, and you have to hand it to people that didn't get sucked in by that.
I mean, guilty here too, right? I mean,
Mhm.
it's, yeah, that's, and as you said before, the focus, like that is hard to go do over a long enough timeline, especially if you're starting to be successful. Well, if I'm successful here, maybe I must be able to be successful in these other crazy whatever the heck's.
Yeah, especially if like, hey, look at this idiot over here, he's making money. You know what I mean? But you don't know that for 15 years before you met him, he was
Yes.
in the trenches. Yeah.
Right. Selling cars the last 20 years and then suddenly switches to real estate, like Grant Cardone, like that, kind of thing, hear his story. Um, that such great answers, Charles. I think it's some
Thank
of the
you.
most profound answers I've heard on Rapid Fire Rounds. And they're always a little bit different. And before we wrap up, tell us how people can get in touch with you if someone wanted to invest with you on at your company. What's the name of your company? How do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, so if you're interested in learning anything more about multifamily investing, whether active or passive, go to harborsidepartners.com. And on our website, harborsidepartners.com, we have a YouTube channel. I put out a weekly episode, and then I also do like a strategy Saturday, which is like 5 or 7 minutes of me breaking down one strategy or something that's going on in my mind or something I picked up at a real estate meetup or something else that's happening in real estate or business. And then sign up for our newsletter. We have a newsletter on there. It's free. It goes out every week on Wednesday. And then we also have a passive investing guide as well. So you sign up for one of them, you'll get everything. And if you're interested in passive investing in real estate, get on a call with one of us, myself, or one of my partners, and we can talk to you about it and add you to our deal list so you can get new deals as they come in. And yeah, anything for active or passive real estate investors. I do some active real estate investing coaching as well. So all that information's on there. Go on there, dig through it, and feel free to reach out to us.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Charles. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've learned things myself. I've been like taking notes. I mean, the 80/20. I've not heard that book before. I'm going to be ordering that right on this. How to get out this. But from the West Coast to the East Coast, I appreciate your time. I'm very grateful for it. I know time is money, especially in this business. Thank you for coming on the show, Charles. And that's a wrap, man.
Thank you so much.